Good morning, everyone. This is Miss Cobb coming to you today with a reading lesson. And the book that we will be reading today will be The Keeping Quilt. It's a book written by Patricia Palacco, who also wrote yesterday's book, Thank You, Mr. Falker. So, with all further ado, let's begin.
When my great-grandma Anna came to America, she wore the same thick overcoat and big boots she had worn for farm work. But her family weren't dirt farmers anymore. In New York City, her father's work was hauling things on a wagon, and the rest of the family made artificial flowers all day. Everyone was in a hurry, and it was so crowded. Not like in back home Russia. But all the same, it was their home, and most of their neighbors were just like them. When Anna went to school, English sounded to her like pebbles dropping into shallow water. Shh, shh, shh. In 6 months, she was speaking English. Her parents almost never learned, so she spoke English for them too. The only things she had left of back home Russia were her dress and the babushka she liked to throw up into the air when she was dancing. And her dress was getting too small. After her mother had sewn her a new one, she took her old dress and babushka. Then from a basket of old clothes, she took Uncle Vladimir's shirt, Aunt Havela's nightdress, and an apron of Aunt Natasha's. "We will make a quilt to help us always remember home," Anna's mother said. "It will be like having the family in back home Russia dance around us at night." And so it was. Anna's mother invited all the neighborhood ladies. They cut out animals and flowers from the scraps of clothing. Anna kept the needles threaded and handed them to the ladies as they needed them. The border of the quilt was made of Anna's babushka. On Friday nights, Anna's mother would say the prayers that started the Sabbath. The family ate challah and chicken soup. The quilt was the tablecloth. Anna grew up and fell in love with great-grandpa Sasha. To show he wanted to be her husband, he gave Anna a gold coin, a dried flower, and a piece of rock salt, all tied into a linen handkerchief. The gold was for wealth, the flower for love, and the salt so their lives would have flavor. She accepted the hanky. They were engaged. Under the wedding huppah, Anna and Sasha promised each other love and understanding. After the wedding, the men and women celebrated separately. When my grandma Carly was born, Anna wrapped her daughter in the quilt to welcome her warmly into the world. Carly was given a gift of gold, flour, salt, and bread. Gold so she would never know poverty. A flower so she would always know love. Salt so her life would always have flavor, and bread so that she would never know hunger. Carly learned to keep the Sabbath and to cook and clean and do washing. "Married you'll be someday," Anna told Carly. And again, the quilt became a wedding huppah, this time for Carly's wedding to Grandpa George. Men and women celebrated together, but they still did not dance together. In Carly's wedding bouquet was a gold coin.
Just hold tight. The video is just loading, so bear with me.
Bread, and salt. Carly and George moved to a farm in Michigan, and Great-Grandma Anna came to live with them. The quilt once again wrapped a new little girl, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen called Anna Lady Grandma. She had grown very old and was sick a lot of the time. The quilt kept her legs warm. On Anna's 98th birthday, the cake was a kulik, a rich cake with raisins and candied fruit in it. When Great-Grandma Anna died, prayers were said to lift her soul to heaven. My mother, Mary Ellen, was now grown up. When Mary Ellen left home, she took the quilt with her. When she became a bride, the quilt became her huppah. For the first time, friends who were not Jews came to the wedding. My mother wore a suit, but in her bouquet were gold, bread, and salt. The quilt welcomed me, Patricia, into the world, and it was the tablecloth for my first birthday party. At night, I would trace my fingers around the edges of each animal on the quilt before I went to sleep. I told my mother stories about the animals on the quilt. She told me whose sleeve had made the horse, whose apron had made the chicken, whose dress had made the flowers, and whose babushka went around the edge of the quilt. The quilt was a pretend cape when I was in the bull ring, or sometimes a tent in the steaming Amazon jungle. At my wedding to Enzo Mario, men and women danced together. In my bouquet were gold, bread, and salt, and a sprinkle of wine, so I would always know laughter. 20 years ago, I held Tracy Denise in the quilt for the first time. Someday she, too, will leave home, and she will take the quilt with her. This book has become almost as important to me as the quilt itself. It is a wonderful way to not only introduce my remarkable family, but also demonstrate their personal triumphs, disappointments, and their ever-powerful love that has reached across 6 generations and an ocean of time. Patricia Palacco, author, illustrator.
All right. So, with that story, again, it was about Patricia Palacco's family and how a quilt was passed down from generation to generation, from her grandmother passing it down to her mom, and then her mom passing it down to her, and then she has a daughter, Patricia, and she's going to pass that quilt down to her as well. So we are going to now watch the video of Patricia Palacco showing her keeping quilt.
So every night before I go to sleep, and this is the quilt, by the way. This is the real keeping quilt. It's not in terribly good shape. It has been around, probably the oldest piece is on here, about 150 years. The original babushka that was around the edge of this is gone. It literally disintegrated off. What you see here now is an American gingham. But if you look at this edge, it's literally disappearing. It's tearing and shredding, especially this edge. But when I was little, this quilt was on my bed. I always slept with the yellow horse here by my face. And every night before I go to sleep, I'd run my fingers around the edge of this horse. Do you know, touching this horse now, I know we're making a film, but I can hear my grandmother's voice as if she's in this room every time I touch this. I haven't heard her voice for over 62 years. But she'd sit on the edge of the bed and pull these up in front of my face and say, "Tricia, whose dress made these?" I said, "Well, that's Aunt Havela's apron." "Yes." "Whose shirt is this?" "That's Uncle Vladimir's shirt." I mean, she had me name all of these people, and I can name them to this day. I see them through her heart, and I never knew them. She would always end though, Patricia, whose dress is the blue? That's when I'd say, well, that's Anna. That's my great-grandma. That was her dress when she came all the way from Russia. That's the dress she was wearing. Yes, my grandmother would say. Of course, what I'm going to tell you next scandalized my mother, and probably going to scandalize some of the parents that are listening to this. My grandmother used to let me take this outdoors and play with it. I used to throw this thing up on my back, put a great big safety pin right here. I'd get my rotten red-headed older brother's socks, wad them up, stick them in my sweatshirt, so I had huge bulging muscles. Then I'd fly around the yard pretending this was my cape and that I was Superman. My grandpa took my brother and I to a movie, and in that movie we saw a bullfight from Mexico. I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life then. My grandpa kept a goat tied in the front yard. I went to my grandfather and said, Grandpa, I'm going to become a bullfighter. So I went and got the quilt, took one of my brother's shoes and put it on my head because I thought that made me look like a bullfighter. Went out in the front yard, walked up to that poor little goat and waved it around in front of his poor little face till my rotten red-headed older brother let our bull out of the pen for real. And that thing chased me all over the yard. Finally chased me up a peach tree, kept me up there for almost 5 hours. And you know how you see them in cartoons? Maybe you don't know this. That's how they really act. They stand there and paw the ground and kick the dirt up and smoke comes out of their nose. I've never been so scared. And I looked over on the fence to see where my brother was, and there he was sitting, and he was so happy to see me in such distress. And I said, Richie, go get Grandma. Have her come get this thing before it figures out how to climb up here and kill me. I don't think I've ever seen him walk that slowly for the house in my life. He got her, or I wouldn't be here to tell the story.
So that was Patricia Palacco and her telling her tales of her keeping quilt that she still has to this day. So I'm going to stop share and I'm going to change screens to show you what you will be doing today with the lesson. So I'm gonna go to courses and go to this week's folder. Going to Tuesday. And going to go to the Keeping Quilt timeline. Open a new window. And again, this timeline does not have to be printed. You can do this on paper and pencil. So as it loads, I'll explain what the timeline is. A timeline tells you when one event happens in order, chronological order. And that is just in the order of, for instance, when we have a timeline of a person, it will have like when they were born and then important events in their life in the order that it happened. So with this one, you are pulling the events, and the events are right here. And in the story, you are going to listen for those events, and you're going to see which one happens after the first event, and you're going to put it in order because these are all of the events, and then you are going to again put them in order. You can again, like I said, write it out, or if you print it out, you can cut and paste or write it in. It's your choice, but that would be all that you are going to do today. Is the timeline. because it's going to be used for another activity later on this week when we are going to write Patricia Palacco's biography. So, as always, I hope you all are staying safe, and I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you guys in the next lesson. Bye-bye.